Live. Okay, good evening, everyone. Thanks for tuning in here at Saddle Mountain Unified School District. I'm Paul Tighe, superintendent, and next to me across the way is Mr. Edgar Garcia. He's the Tonopah Valley High School principal. I want to welcome him and thank him as well as our staff for helping us do this little live broadcast. And I appreciate your time this evening. So here's kind of what we had planned. I wanted to give you a little information about our upcoming override renewal election and some information about schools reopening and those plans. But more importantly, I want to provide some time for you to send in some questions so that we can try to answer everyone's questions this evening. So if you have questions, please enter them in the chat box. Mr. Garcia is going to monitor that. So I'm going to give you guys a little information, and then we'll do question and answers. So let's go. Alrighty, so the first thing is talking a little bit about our override election. And our staff put together a great video that's very simplified about what could be very complex, which is school finance in Arizona. And so I want to just start by showing the great video they did. So let's take a look at this, and then I'll try to explain a little bit more.
If you are like most people, you probably find school finance to be a confusing subject, mostly because school finance is so much different than our own personal finance. For us, we go to work, collect a paycheck, and deposit that money into a bank. From there, we write checks, debit our accounts, transfer online, or make withdrawals to pay for our mortgage, utilities, car, and groceries. School finance works much differently. Once we understand how school finance works, we can better understand how our tax dollars help to reach the educational goals of our students. School funding comes from two main sources: the state of Arizona local property taxes and the federal government. Local and state funding provides about 90% of a school district's budget, while federal funding supplements the other 10%. But this is where things start to get complicated. Every dollar that comes into a school district has rules attached to it on how it can be spent. Money that comes from the federal government has very specific rules and is for areas like special education and to help students living in poverty, which is commonly referred to as Title I. Funds from the state are split into two buckets: maintenance and operations and capital. 95% of funds go into maintenance and operations, commonly called M&O, and the remaining 5% into capital. M&O funds go to pay the daily operation of our schools, like salaries, transportation, utilities, and things like paper. Capital funds go to pay for durable items that the school will own and use for many years, things like buildings, buses, furniture, and technology. If the money in either of the two buckets is not enough to meet the needs of our students, the district can ask the local community to pass an override or a bond, a tax on property. Overrides and bonds are different, and the funds generated by them go into separate buckets. Bonds are for capital expenses and pay for things like building security, buses, and technology. Overrides are for the M&O bucket. An M&O override is good for 7 years, and the Saddle Mountain community voted for our first override in 1985 and has voted to renew it several times since then. As our budgets have been shrinking because of cuts at the state level, we depend on our community to help us meet the needs of our students. Funds from the override go to support programs like all-day kindergarten, career and technical education, music, PE, extracurricular activities, as well as maintaining smaller class sizes. We hope this video helps clear up school finances, but if you still have questions or want more information, you can find it on our district website at SMUSD90.org or give us a call.
Okay, well, I hope that video helped explain a little bit about school finance. And I just want to fill in a few gaps, give you some information so you're well informed with the upcoming election. So first of all, what is an override? It's a mechanism that the legislature set up years ago to allow the local taxpayers to exceed the budget capacity that the legislature sets. So in other words, our school board can't just raise taxes and increase spending. That it's all formula based, set by the legislature each year. The only mechanism that the local taxpayers have to do anything besides what the legislature determines as the appropriate funding level is through an override. And that basically allows us to exceed the revenue control limit by up to 15%. Now, Saddle Mountain has had an override in place since 1985, and it's only 10% So it's not the maximum, and it does allow us to spend more than the cap that the legislature put on our spending. Now, we had a bond election last year, and we are so thankful for the great support by the voters. I want you to know that we've already started some of the great projects. Now, bond is a different mechanism, gets a little confusing. A bond is kind of like a mortgage. It allows the district to borrow money to build things. So we're putting additions on at Tonopah Valley High School and Winters Well Elementary School and adding some classroom space to both campuses. We've done some site improvements at the high school football field in particular, and we're doing some field and playground work at Winters Well as well. We have some safety projects in a few of our school offices to make it more safe for our students and staff. We have some new buses that have already arrived and some more on order. We have air conditioning unit replacements and efficiencies across the district, some technology stuff. A lot of good things happening right now, but that's all through the bond. And a bond, again, is like a mortgage, but it's limited as to what we can spend bond funds on. It's buying things. Now, M&O, maintenance and operations, is our operating budget. And most of that, 83% roughly, is salary and benefits. We pay people to do things. We pay teachers to teach. We pay support staff to support learning. We pay bus drivers to drive. We pay food service workers to provide meals, etc. The remaining part of our maintenance and operation budget is insurance and classroom supplies and just electricity, utilities, things like that. So it's mostly people when we start talking about our M&O budget. And so we have this override up for renewal because they're good for 7 years, except the last 3 years it spends down by a third. So realistically, every 5 years, districts need to seek renewal of the overrides that they have. And so that's what's on the election. November 3rd is the election day. And as you probably can imagine, it's going to be a long ballot. So make sure you turn it over and go to the back, because we'll probably be like the last question or close to the last question on the ballot. And we don't want you to not vote on that particular item. So a little bit more about it. Again, this is a continuation. So we're not asking for more money. We're not asking to increase taxes. We're just asking to keep what we've had in place for many years. So it's just a continuation. It's not a tax increase. We're not asking for more money or anything else. We just want to continue what we have in place, which does fund many good programs across the district. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. So you might be saying, well, what does it cost? So to continue this, the average homeowner will pay about $1.41 a month on an assessed valuation for residential property of $100,000. And so that's the tax assessed value, not the retail or market value, which is usually higher. So this is what the county assessors have, the residential value, and that's what they base the taxes on. So for us, that provides almost $1.5 million each year. It's a lot of money for us, and it comes at a very, very low price. $1.41 a month is less than a cup of coffee. So again, not a new tax, just continuing what we have already got in place. What does it buy? Well, $1.41 a month pays for full day kindergarten. The state only allows us funding for half day kindergarten, so the override pays for the other half. We have smaller class sizes, competitive teacher salaries, support staff wages. Many of our athletic and extracurricular programs are funded through the override. We have fine arts like art, music, and some of our elective classes, our career and technical ed programs, particularly at the high school, technology classes, foreign language, a lot of important programs for our kiddos, and the override is what funds those. We also support staff development and maintenance of our schools. So these are really important things. And again, they've been in place a long time. We're not asking for more. We just want to keep what we have. So what does that look like if it's not renewed? You can see in the chart on here, the approximate values based on this year's budget of spend down. So it's almost $500,000 a year, each year for 3 years. So 3 years from now, we'd be short $1.5 million, 10% of our budget. So just to compare what our tax rate looks like here versus neighboring districts, I pulled a few. So we have Buckeye Elementary and Buckeye Union High School District. There's two different tax types, and I don't want to get mired in the details here. It's primary and secondary, but you put them together, the total levy, you can see how like Buckeye's $9.30 compared to our $2.76. And that's per $100 of assessed valuation. So you go to other unified districts like Dysart, $661 compared to our $276. Litchfield, Agua Fria, $704. Palo Verde, Buckeye Union, $728. Again, $276. I can't find a lower tax rate in Arizona. And we have to thank Palo Verde Nuclear Generating Station because they are a very, very expensive piece of property and they pay a lot of taxes. In fact, more tax money leaves the district. It's almost 50-50 now, but more tax money leaves the district to go into state equalization than stays to fund our schools. All righty, so it's interesting. I was going to tell you, I had a thought of telling you that you have to register to vote by October 5th. And just within about 24 hours ago, a court ruling said that you now have until October 23rd to register to vote. So it's not too late. I know some of you may have just moved into the Tartesso neighborhood in particular. We've got lots of houses being built. Sometimes you forget you've got a million address changes to make, but don't forget to change your address with your voter registration. That way you can vote in our election. And it's very important to vote. Vote by November 3rd. You can still register if you're not registered, and you can still request an early ballot, which would be a mail-in ballot. So I've given you a lot of information on the election. Put your questions in the chat box. Now let's shift a little bit to the reopening plan. So we are excited to have students coming back. Our staff is so excited. The teachers just can't wait. Every teacher I talk to says, I just can't wait. So we're really excited, and the date is coming up very quickly here. As you might know, Friday, there's no school. It's our one day of fall break. That's the end of the first quarter. So we're already transitioning to the second quarter, which makes a good break with the academic changes of going from completely remote learning with some on-site support to having in-person learning start with our beginning of the second quarter, which would be on October 13th. That's Tuesday the 13th. Regular school days, regular hours. We're excited about that. The buses will be going, although in our survey, I know many of you said you would rather drive your students in, and that'll help us keep the numbers low on the buses because social distancing on a school bus is nearly impossible, which is why following county guidelines, kids would have to have a mask on to get on the bus. So that's really important. With this change, the funny thing is we had an early release day scheduled for the 14th, which would have been day 2 of in-person learning. Didn't make sense. So when the board approved the October 13th date, they also moved the early release from the 14th to the 28th of October. So it's moved up 2 weeks. We have a lot of information on our website. The web address is on there, and I believe we're going to have the slide deck posted so you can download it, and that should be a hyperlink. You'll be able to click on it, get right to that website, and you might say there's more information you ever wanted. We've got a lot of stuff posted there. So if you get bored and want a lot of details, we have a lot of information about the safety precautions we'll have in place, how we're going to mitigate risk for our students and staff, because that's our most important thing, is keeping everybody safe and healthy. And we're confident we can do it, but we have to modify how we do business a little bit, just like we all have. You know, you can't go to the grocery store without doing things differently. And so it's going back to school is no different. Each principal also has some site-specific measures because each campus is a little different, and some of the things with dismissals and arrivals and the regular procedures, lunch, recess, and moving kids around, it's been modified a little bit. And so they have even more details because some of those things are a little general in our reopening plan so that it can be tailored to each site. So we are following county guidelines, and that's for everything from when it's safe to open, with what we do with exposures, quarantines, and reporting. So one of the things that was really exciting, every Thursday, the state health officials and then the county health officials publish what the local metrics are. And so we can actually look at it by zip code, by city, by school district, and by county, and then statewide. And so last week, all of our metrics were green. There were 0 cases, new cases in our district boundaries. Now, a lot of our staff and some of our students live outside the district boundaries, so we do look regionally too. But all of the metrics have improved, and I think that's a lot to do with wearing masks and keeping social distancing. In particular, wash your hands stay safe. You're better off staying at home. All the stuff you've been hearing is really making a difference. So as I said before, we will have transportation, but we do have to have kids have masks to get on the bus. And we are going to continue remote learning. So even though in person started, we've heard from many of you, about 25% of you said, "Look, I'm not comfortable with that yet." And so we respect that. If you're not feeling comfortable with that, you have people at home with health risks. You don't want to take the risk. Safety comes first. So that's why we're continuing remote learning. It's going to be tough on our teachers. They're working really hard. They're reinventing how they've been doing instruction already, and now we're asking them to do it again a little differently. And so it's a big change for us. They haven't done it this way before, so please give them some patience. I know you have. You guys have been very supportive parents, but it's going to be a little bit different when they have kids in the classroom and online at the same time. And it's really hard sometimes when you've got a room full of kids, even if there's 20 kids and 10 are still online, you have to pay attention to both. It's going to be a little challenging, but we've got such great teachers and staff. I know they're going to do so well with it. Some of our teachers have already been doing it. I'm just amazed at what they've been able to do through remote learning, and the ones who've been modeling doing this, what we call synchronous learning, where they're both online and in person. They've been doing great stuff. So it's really, really important that if your son or daughter is sick, keep him or her home. Please don't send them in. Any little thing and I know there's going to be normal sicknesses just like there is every year, and we can't tell the difference. I have a doctorate, but I'm not a medical doctor, and I wouldn't be able to tell you the difference if it's COVID or not. And we have to be safe. So if there are those symptoms, and I know I have allergies, I get sniffly and stuff like that, it happens. But when in doubt, keep your kids home, please. And then the nice thing is with remote learning, they can still be engaged and not lose out in instructional time. So we will be screening students for fevers, and the CDC defines that as a temperature above 100.4 degrees upon entry to the campuses. So we'll be checking kids as they get off buses, and we'll be checking kids as they walk through the front door. We have walk-through scanners. They're very quick and very accurate. The little handheld ones that we use, they're not quite as accurate because they're thermal, and the walk-through ones are infrared, which are more accurate. So if you're standing out in the sun and the sun's on your forehead, your forehead temperature gets higher than your body temperature. So anyway, now maybe it'll start cooling off next week. But we are doing everything we can to make sure it's safe, and we're going to have a lot of great learning going on. We're really excited about that. Some of the things you might ask about too are about athletics. And so you might have known our football team had its first game, a home game last week. Go Phoenix, they won. And we've had some volleyball games too already. So last week, athletics was going full steam, and we're following the Arizona Interscholastic Association guidance with that, and working with other teams in the conference. Our middle school athletics are going to be a go as well. However, the conference at this point has no spectators. That could change, but right now that's what the current guidance is, and agreement among all the teams that are involved. So we've been limiting some of our spectator attendance at the high school events, and that worked out just fine this week. And we think that model will be fine to keep everybody safe and still have some people cheering on. So I feel like I've been talking a mile a minute for a long time, and I'm wondering if we have some questions in the chat box that Mr. Garcia might be able to catch up. I think there was one that he's probably already thinking of that was about what do I do with a Chromebook. So, our guys, Mr. Bailey, Mr. Wisser, and team have done such a great job distributing like 1,000 Chromebooks. And of course, we had them all ready for school, so they're all distributed in every classroom. They managed to get them from 4 campuses, organized them, and got them out, and just stuff we haven't done before. Weren't planning for that. So anyway, they have to come back, right? So what we're asking is when you when your child, son or daughter comes back, have him or her bring the Chromebook and the charger. So bring both the Chromebook and the charger to school, and bring it right to the classroom. And then the teachers will check them in the classroom. So we do want you to bring them back. There is for non-high school students, for our K kiddos, there's a refundable technology deposit. So if you want it back, if you bring the Chromebook back next week, so by the end of the first week, that we're back, we'll process refunds and we'll be writing those checks. I don't want to make a long story out of this, but our checks go through the county, but we're going to write them out of a small account that we can write checks physically. So we'll write them as fast as we can and get the money back to you. However, if you don't want it back, it's okay. You don't have to ask for the money back. We'll donate it into the technology fund, and so that would be great as well. So that was one of the questions. Do you have any others, Mr. Garcia?
Yes, we do. What if we decided to go back to remote learning because going in person isn't working out?
Well, that's a great question. So if going back to person, I assume, the question is like, what if the health metrics get bad enough that we have to revert back to remote learning? So the good news is we'll be doing both at the same time. And so if we had to, and that would be, I think, worst possible case, that's like saying we have to close schools. And I would hate for that to happen. But if we had to, we could. And, we certainly hope not to. And I think if we stay safe and take all the precautions that we have in place, that won't be an issue. The nice thing is I've talked to superintendents from all over the state, and other schools have already gone back. And they've had a few cases with students, but it hasn't been bad. Like they've all said, it's been much better than we thought. Our worst fears were that we'd have outbreaks, and that hasn't really happened yet. And there's a lot of statistics on the transmission by children is different than adults. So kids, fortunately, aren't as affected by coronavirus as adults. And I think it's a 20 to 44 age range is where most of the cases are. So we hope that won't happen. There will be cases where, somewhere where they might have to close a classroom. I'm not aware of that happening anywhere yet, but I did see, like in the headlines, New York City's, I think, closed a couple schools just the other day because of outbreaks, and they have different parameters. Theirs were like 3%, and Arizona was 7% to get to yellow and 5% to get to green in terms of positive case percentages. And again, you got to keep in mind, we're in a small community. So let's just say last week there were 10 active cases in Tonopah, and then this week there were 12. That's 2 more. That's a 20% increase. So percentage-wise, 2 people could make a big difference. So we have to look at more than just one indicator too. But we hope that won't happen.
Another question.
All right, bring it on.
Yeah. So what if a child isn't comfortable wearing a mask all day?
Yeah. That's a great question. So I don't think any kid's going to be comfortable wearing a mask all day. I'm not comfortable wearing a mask all day. And so I recognize and I have greater respect for our medical personnel, first responders who that's what they do. They wear masks all day. And even, our grounds guys here, when they're outside doing grounds work, they wear masks because, there's a lot of dust in the air and stuff. And so I can imagine how that is out in 115 degree heat. But, masks are important. The research has shown that that's what needs to happen. And the county board of supervisors has basically said that we have to wear masks. So it's not even worth debating. We do have them wearing masks, and when they can socially distance and take mask breaks, we will be doing that. So we will have planned mask breaks, like taking them off and getting some fresh air. Ideally, we want to do that whenever we can in outdoor environments or open air environments. And so kids will have recess in the elementary grades. Kiddos will have recess and keep apart, and they can take their masks off outside. We want that. And of course, when they're eating, they'll have their masks off. And one of our biggest challenges with that is breakfast in the classroom, because it's going to be hard, depending on how many kids are there, to keep them 6 feet apart. There was a study in Europe that was pretty extensive that showed that there actually was no difference between 3 feet of social distance and 6 feet of social distancing. So we think kids will be safe having breakfast, take their masks off, don't touch each other, don't get close to each other, but stay at their desks, and then put their mask back on to throw their food away, wash their hands, things like that. So mask breaks will be important, and we'll do our best to make sure that they have those pretty regularly, because it's not that comfortable wearing masks.
That's it, really, so far. I have more questions now going in.
All right. Well, if you have other questions, we'll give another minute or two here to get them posted.
Yeah. And just to elaborate, for the high school, I know the elementary schools have planned mass breaks with recess, and for the high school, we've actually added more time in the transition periods for mass breaks specifically. We've had 4 minutes historically in between classes. We have now up to 10 minutes in between each class, and that is going to be encourage students to go outside, socially distant, and take the mask off so they can breathe, because it is tough. But I'm sure people right now are getting used to wearing masks in and out of different places and buildings and businesses. So we understand that, and we're trying to accommodate and give people breaks.
So one question that wasn't asked that maybe you're thinking of, or when I say this, you're going to say, oh yeah, good question, is, how long are we going to have remote learning continue? And I've got a great answer for you. I don't know. Just being honest, folks. So really what we want to do is make sure that's an option that's available as long as it's needed. And so that could mean, until January. If situation requires it, we can continue it longer. I mean, it's really going to be hard to tell. And what we want to do is make sure that we have options that people are comfortable with. So if, there's a lot of parents who still, let's say in, mid-December saying, no, I'm still not ready to send my kid in, we can at that point come to a decision of going to like a strictly online program, or continuing with remote learning into the third quarter. So that's a question I can't answer. I can give you my best guess is that we're going to try to be as flexible as we can so that we meet everybody's needs.
Another question. So this question, thanks for the question. If my child goes back to in-person learning but changes their mind, can they go back to remote learning? So good question.
Yeah, these are good questions. So what we don't want to have is a situation where kids, say, well, today I don't want to go to school, so why don't I just stay home, or running a little late. It's very hard on the teachers, and taking attendance and other things. There's different procedures for remote kids versus in person, and so we ask that you commit to a model. And so we're giving you the flexibility, and we want you to stick with the model and not be changing. If at the end of the quarter you say, that remote learning was a whole lot better, fine, switch back if we're still continuing in the third quarter. Or if, you're saying, look, this remote learning just isn't working, the metrics have been really good, I'm comfortable, contact your principal and they'll work with you. But it's not a day-to-day thing. But I will say that I've told you earlier, keep your kids home if they're sick. And if they are, they can still engage in remote learning. So that would be kind of the exception, is when kids are sick or if they're exposed. So if you have somebody at home who is tested positive, we, following the CDC and county and state recommendations, want you to keep him or her home for 14 days. If somebody tests positive, they need to stay home for 14 days in a quarantine. For 10 days. So why 10 instead of 14? I guess if you already have the disease, or virus, you can't transmit it after 10 days. Whereas if you don't have it, you might have it, or you test negative, you might still have it for up to 14 days before it manifests. So we don't want sick kids or staff coming to school. So in that case, we would say, call in sick, stay home, and you can still log in for remote access to school that day without being absent. But otherwise, we ask you to commit for the quarter.
And a piggyback question. So another question about the duration of the amount of time once they decide. So how does it, if they go back in person now, do they have to stay the whole second quarter? And this is kind of a two type of question, depending what grade level they are, determine how long they will stay. But you did mention a little bit about there's so many scenarios, right? If somebody's sick, your family's sick, that can really get into how long kids can stay. But if you're ruling out any exposure, we want elementary students to stay for the quarter and high school students stay for the semester, which really we're already into the second part of the semester. So that would be through December for a high school, and possibly, I'm not quite sure the second quarter, how long, if that goes into
It's the
January.
same timing. So basically the same. So your semester and the elementary quarters would coincide. So they both end in December. So yeah, we want to be as flexible as possible, but just understand that it's not that easy just to decide day to day. So contact your school's principal, and he or she will work with you. And we know there's extenuating circumstances, things will come up, and with legitimate reasons, we'll absolutely work with you to be as flexible as possible to help you all. And we want your kids to be safe, but successful but safe, and that's safety first, and then we're doing our best with academics.
Another question, kind of around the same topic. And so, how does the absences count, like policy, quarantining? How does that go together?
So that's a great question too. I love these questions. So, absences, obviously we want kids in school. The whole notion of being in school has changed dramatically from prior to last mid-March. So if a student is home sick but can engage in learning, that can count as being quote unquote in school that day. So we just need you to communicate that. So if your child's sick, call the attendance line, say, my kid's a little sick, or, has a headache, whatever, just don't want to send them in, take the chance. He or she would like to do remote learning today, that's fine. And that will count. So just, on the attendance line, we can then mark it as present with remote learning. So they're treated differently. And I know it sounds crazy, but there's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes on the backside, how kids are reported to the state. We have to report, all of our kids' attendance every day, because that's part of that funding formula I mentioned earlier when talking about the override. So we have to account for that. We're audited like crazy on that particular item. So it's really important that we mark it correctly. And there's a different funding rate for kids when they're in person versus at home. And so we will be flexible to accommodate that, but we need you to notify us, and then you, parents, attest to the kid being in school or not.
Some more exposure type of questions. If a child is exposed to a family member with a positive COVID test, would you like them to stay home? I
So
think you've kind of
yeah,
touched
but
base
it's
a little bit.
important. Let me just articulate a little bit on that. So if somebody is in the same household, and I actually had a phone conversation with people at the county health today about something very similar related to a staff member. If somebody is in the same household, they want that quarantine to happen. So they say 14 days, unless they test positive, and then it can be 10 days. So we have flow charts posted online, and also the county health department has a little online tool. You can just answer some yes, no questions, and it'll tell you, whether to stay home, whether to isolate or not. And it's the same as the flow chart, but it's kind of cool. It's online, and you just answer a couple of questions, and it gives you your answer.
Follow-up question. So if there is student exposure at school, they're mentioning that they've read somewhere that says that it'll be notified by mail. Can that be changed to phone call for the speed? Question mark. Or are they supposed to stay home for the 14 days?
So another great question too. So we are working with the county health officials on notifications, but it's our intent that if there's a positive case in a classroom, that we will notify the other students' parents in that classroom. And mail is, quite frankly, not the most efficient means of communication. We've adopted the Remind app this year, and that is actually our most efficient way. A teacher can send out a message very quickly. A principal can send it to a specific class. And that's what we would want to do, is to get that information out as quickly as possible. And honestly, the Remind app is the fastest way for us to get that to you. It's faster than emailing, and it's faster than if we try to do an auto dialer to a select group or have manual calls. But our intent would be to give you the information, because then you might say, well, there's an exposure. Do I send my kid? And I would say, you probably won't do anything differently, except make sure you tell your son or daughter, keep that mask on, keep away from people, wash your hands, use hand sanitizer, do all the things that we need to do. Sometimes just knowing, hey, there really is a case out there, is a little wake-up call. And we don't want those wake-up calls, but our intent would be to notify you as quickly as possible. And if you're not signed up in the Remind app, you really need to be. Please. It's the most efficient way for communication. And it's really cool. There's some great ways that you can talk to a teacher very easily as well. So I highly, highly encourage you to enroll in that.
Next question. Are there going to be staggered drop-off pickups, like different times for different grades?
So it's a great question. And at this point, we don't have a wide range of staggered times. We do have, we're going to try our best to stick to our schedule. So like the bus routes are posted online. If you go on our website and go on the transportation page, you can find them. There's also a little online tool where you can enter your address and it'll tell you the pickup and drop off times. And one of the things I'll just say with that tool, the GPS system and some of the addressing is really new, particularly in the Tartesso development. What we find is sometimes it'll tell you a different stop than we'd really rather you be at, even because it'd be the same distance from two stops. So it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. And it allows you to look at the start and stop time and drop off times for buses. So within that, we have some special groups of students, some of our special ed buses that we stagger the times a little bit, but not wide ranges and not splitting necessarily by grade levels, because I know that causes problems for parents with siblings. And it's really hard to route buses by grade level because we're so large, 550 square miles, our buses go all over the place.
That's all we got. So
That's
far.
all we have?
Yeah.
Well, we can give it another minute or two, see if there's anything else. We don't want to waste people's time, but also sometimes as you hear an answer and you're like, oh, let me ask this. And, it takes a minute to type it. And if you type like me, it's kind of hunt and peck a little bit. So it takes a minute.
Do have a couple reminders as we wait for some of the questions coming up. Athletics, we have a home football game on Friday. Like Dr. Tighe mentioned, our football team is off to a good start, 1-0 start. They have a game 7 p.m. on Friday, and actually the girls volleyball team is playing tonight in Kingman, and they're off to a 2-2 start, and they play tomorrow and also on Thursday. So come out and support your Phoenix. We are, unlike the elementary schools and junior high athletics, we are limiting to 25% of our attendance. And so that's the last few games has been perfect. It worked out really well. Everybody's followed the guidelines and everybody's been safe and cheered on our home teams. So, yeah,
so like Mr. Garcia, when you say 25% of the attendance, you mean like, so if it's in the volleyball team, 25% of the capacity of the gym, so like 104 or something like that?
That's correct. So
And
it's 25% of the capacity of what we can put in the gym and in the football stands. So good question.
Great.
I got a couple more here come up.
All right.
So
good thing we waited.
yeah. So I found stores are running out of masks again. Is there a plan to address a mask shortage during the school year if there is one? So masks.
I
Shortage.
haven't heard that. All of our suppliers, so we've stocked up on some stuff, but if you can imagine, we have 2,300 and some odd students and 250 staff members. So if we supplied a mask to every one of them every day, we'd run out very quickly. So we've stocked up on sanitization supplies. So I told you we bought like some walk-through temperature scanners. We also bought some specialized sanitization equipment and stockpiled on masks, some gloves, some face shields and other things. But I have not heard that. I've heard that the supplies are more readily available, like they cranked up production. And so that's the last I heard was there wasn't a problem. So hopefully there's no shortage. We have our custodians and even our bus drivers will put these backpacks on with special sanitizer, and they can spray a bus or a room in about 2 minutes, and it'll sanitize the surfaces. So we have those, and so those are just some of the extra measures that we're doing to keep it as germ free as possible. But I haven't heard about a mask shortage. Hopefully not. But you can make a mask. It just needs to be a cloth face covering.
Got three more come in, and they're all kind of related. So I'm going to kind of group them. It's about buses and riding buses. So, um, one, will siblings have to sit together, um, or can they sit with friends? Two, can the children be dropped off in the mornings or take the bus home?
Yeah. So, okay. Ideally, it would be best to have siblings together on the bus just because we want to keep kids as distant as possible. So part of it might depend on how many kids are on the bus. If there's 10 kids on the bus, they can probably space out a little bit. But what our plan is that we would fill from the back forward. So in other words, the first kids on the bus go all the way to the back and then you work way forward. That way they're not walking past each other. And then drop off will be the opposite. So the kids who get off first will be in the front of the bus, they get off and it continues. That's actually more efficient, so it'll take less time, but it allows less interaction between the kids. So it's really going to depend on how many kids are on the bus, and we may not know. It may vary from day to day. It could be different from morning to afternoon, as a part of that question sounded like. If kids ride or get dropped off in the morning, can they ride the bus home? And yeah, and we've always done that to be as flexible as possible. And we're going to keep our routes the same, but it's a little unknown as to how many kids arrive. Right now, the last survey, about 45% of the parents who had students who are eligible to ride the bus said, no, we'll be driving our kids in. But that survey was a few weeks ago and the metrics have gotten better. So some of you probably said, well, it's probably okay. And that's really a parental choice. We want to, give you the option. And that as things stay good, hopefully they stay good, metrics wise, health metrics, more kids may come to school, more kids may be riding the buses. And so, over time, what we might be able to do one day, we might not be able to do the next day in terms of kids sitting together. But ideally, kids from the same household should sit together. And, sitting together with a friend is fun on the bus, but it also violates social distancing. So, got to keep the mask on, and we want to have as much social distancing as possible, but realize a narrow bus with the little seats is not easy to socially distance. Any new ones?
Comments about where to buy masks online. So Amazon is what we're not getting any kickbacks for Amazon, but somebody on here placed that they sell masks for kids and adults. So.
All right, so there you have it.
We do have some extras. We don't have enough to give, like Dr. Tighe mentioned, a mask to everybody every day, but we do have some extras in the office for those students that do forget. And if your student does forget a mask, have them come to the office and we'll get them, we'll get into our, our emergency fund there and get them a mask for the day.
And, one of the things too, we sometimes forget is, this is going to sound funny. So, what I've heard somebody say is treat your masks like your underwear, change them every day and wash them. So masks can get dirty. So if they're, kids are wearing them all day, we ask if you have, cloth masks, launder them and change them out each day. Just hygiene stuff.
A couple more coming through. So one question is, kids have to wear a mask the whole ride home or the whole ride on the bus? ?
Yes. And again, that's per order. It's law right now. It's an order of the County Board of Supervisors. Aside from that, it's what all the health officials are recommending. So we have no reason not to want to support that. We want to keep everybody safe and healthy, and
that way,
that includes masks.
And that way they have the option as well to, if they don't feel safe, they can get dropped off.
Right.
So. Yep, I think we got one more coming in here. How will the process work for lunch? Will they go to the cafeteria still to get a hot lunch? I mean, we may want to talk a little bit about the summer feeding program and breakfast and lunch, how that's changed a little bit.
Yeah. So we'll talk about food service too. I haven't really touched on that very much. As many of you knew, because we're producing a lot of meals this summer, we are able to have great flexibility from the federal National School Lunch Program. So the federal government, USDA, I think is administered through, gave us great flexibility, whereas we could just hand meals to anyone under age 18. and without verification. So we distributed a lot of meals this summer. And then at the end of July, the rules changed where we couldn't do that. So we had to go back to what would be normal feeding during the school year, which is we have to check each kid in and account for that student's lunch or breakfast. And after a few weeks, the federal government changed its mind again, which was for the better. It gives us the flexibility we had before. So anyone under age 18 can get a free meal. So what we're doing right now is distributing breakfast and lunch curbside drive-through at each school from 9 to 10 a.m. And we're actually doing a delivery to the Belmont Dairy as well because there are a lot of families up there. And I think they're starting to do weekend lunches
Yes.
too. So on Friday, they're giving enough for the weekend. So extra meals. And, when you serve meals that way, you're kind of limited into what you can serve. Like hot meals are really hard because you can't maintain the temperature. Although standing outside, yeah, you can maintain the temperature, but it's not how you're supposed to maintain it. So we've been a little bit limited on, the types of meals we produce. So even now, like our menu is posted online. You can go to the district website, go into food services, and you will find the October menu. And it's not quite what we want it to be because we still have some restrictions on how we can serve food. Now, we will be using our cafeterias, and we've spread the seating out and doing one grade level at a time. So it's going to be a little bit different. Kids, it's not going to be as fun and social. And for kids, I apologize for that, but I also will go back to what I said earlier. Safety and well-being come first. So the purpose is to eat. We want to feed them, get them outside where they can socialize a little bit better. But the food servicing will look pretty similar. Kids will take a lunch and go. And I don't think the salad bars will be available because we can't have that kind of germ spreading opportunity. So it's still a little modified, but lunches will be pretty regular. And we've gotten some good feedback too on the food already this year. We converted to district operation of food services. We don't have an outside contractor providing it anymore. And so we're hoping to make some improvements and make it the way we want it. And we've already had some positive feedback on the food. Kids are saying good things about lunch.
Yeah, and just to reiterate that it's a free breakfast and free lunch for all students. So that's the difference from the past with the continuing the summer lunch feeding program. So through December.
Thank you for doing that. And actually, I think it might go into next year as well. So there's still some vagueness about some of the guidance, and it keeps changing. But at least through the end of December, you don't have to pay for lunch. It's all free for everybody 18 and under or under 18. So if you have another kid who doesn't go to one of our schools, they can still come eat and get a lunch out front. And if you want to take them home, you just say, I've got 5 kids at home. We'll give you five meals. Well, 10. We serve breakfast and lunch at the same time, drive through.
Yeah, 9 to 10.
9 a.m. Every campus drive through. What else? Anything else?
Nothing else popping up. No, that's all we got so far. We'll give it a couple minutes and see if we got any other questions before we get ready to close it up. But
so just if you want to know, like when the Chromebooks are coming back in, the things that teachers are going to check for a couple things. They're going to make sure the screen's not broken, the keyboard's still intact, there's no keys missing, that the charging cable is with it, and that it turns on, is working. So that's part of what that deposit was for. So as long as those are in place, we'll process refunds for those who request it. And that's quite a daunting task, but it allows the kiddos to come right in and still have technology available to them. I will say, well, people are thinking of questions too. Like we were so fortunate because we've had such great support on our bond elections and stuff like that. We've been a 1-to-1 district. We had devices for every kid, and other districts were scrambling, and there were back orders. Like talk about shortage of toilet paper. It was just as big a shortage of Chromebooks, and there were some on boats getting stuck at customs. They wouldn't let the Chromebooks off the boat from China or wherever they were manufactured. So they the district was well poised for that, and it's worked out as well as it could. Any other questions?
Just kudos for the information in the YouTube session. So I think we probably a good idea to continue and give people and parents updates and an avenue to ask questions on how we're going to get ready to start school. We're all excited, and it's definitely different times for us.
Sure is, but we're getting through one challenge after another, and we appreciate the great patience and support we've seen from our parents and community. And I've had parents say, I am so ready for my kids to go back to school, because they're trying to work from home and be a teacher too and help kids. And it's just I know it's been crazy at home as well. So we'd all love to be back to normal. I think we're inching that way and just keeping it safe. But want to thank you for your time this evening. Thanks for tuning in. If you have further questions, you can contact the schools. Oh, I see a flag raised. We might have another question.
So the next question is, and we'll end with this one, unless we get bombarded with some, the classroom being cleaned and sanitized. Are they doing it at the end of each day or week, or what's that look like?
Yeah. So great question. So some of that you'll find is articulated in our reopening plan, which is posted on the website. It's lengthy. I wouldn't read it to you right now, but we've increased custodial hours. So we've hired more custodians. We still have one position to fill, and actually we have bus driver positions to fill too. So we're short like 6 drivers. So seriously, if you know anyone who wants to drive or even be a guest teacher, we really have a shortage in those areas. Anyway, back to the question, we are taking additional precautions. So custodians will go down the hallways, be sanitizing doorknobs throughout the day. And when there's a change in the grouping of kids, which we're trying to limit that, so we're doing a lot of cohorting, which means the kids stay together, don't move around and mingle as much. Now, like in a high school, it's just not possible because they don't have all the same schedule. And some of that too in the middle school, we've got a little bit, but it's pretty limited as to how much interchange is. But when there's a changing of kids, the room needs to get sanitized. And at the end of the day, the room needs to get sanitized. I told you about these fancy backpack sprayers that they have that'll sanitize, within a couple minutes. So that's the kind of stuff we're doing. So additional cleaning, and there's a difference. I learned difference between cleaning and sanitizing. So cleaning will remove dirt. Sanitizing kills germs. So the rooms will be sanitized. The buses will be sanitized, taking additional precautions. We don't want kids drinking out of the water fountains. They can fill water bottles. And we've ordered some, the new type of water dispensers, water fountains that have the bottle filling devices, the touchless things on there. But just like apparently masks, but at one time toilet paper and other things were hard to get. Right now, those are a little hard to get because everybody's doing the same thing. So they're ordered, and when we get them, we'll be installing them, which takes quite a bit of time too. So that's something we try to get done sooner, but it won't be done by Monday or Tuesday.
And with that, yep.
All righty. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time tonight. If you have questions, contact your school, contact the principals, contact me. My email is online. You go on our website and pull that up, or just call the district office, and we'll try to get in touch with you. So thanks. Have a great night.